Imagine sitting down at the dinner table and your teenage girl looking across from you and saying, "Mom, I'm pregnant," or your son saying, "Dad, I think I have an STD." If there was a way to prevent your high school kids from getting pregnant or contracting an STD, wouldn't you want them to have access to it? I became interested in this topic during my senior year when 5 girls in our class got pregnant. Birth control and condoms should be handed out freely to students that are in high school. Most students that participate in sexual activities or relationships often don't know what sex is or how it's going to affect them mentally, emotionally, or physically. The first step in preventing this is offering more sex education classes so that students will know not just the pleasurable encounters of sex, but also the negative aspects. Without more classes, the idea of safe sex may be unclear, causing students to still participate in their old ways. Safe sex is the use of birth control or condoms to prevent pregnancy or from getting an STD. According to a survey by the National Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, most teens and adults share the common sense view that abstinence is the first and best option to prevent pregnancy, but feel that teens need to be given information about birth control and condoms. Sex and the idea of sex is everywhere, in the newspapers and magazines, on social media, and the list continues. Therefore, teens should know how to protect themselves if they decide to partake in sexual encounters. Most teenage pregnancies are unplanned and happen due to the lack of the use of birth control and or condoms. Each year, 1 million girls get pregnant. Evelyn Lerman states that nearly 70% of 12th graders have engaged in sexual intercourse, and half of that is unprotected. Teen pregnancy rates can drastically be lowered if just teens do have access to the birth control and condoms. Melissa Kearney and Philip Laverne reported that international comparisons show contraceptive use in the United States teens is much lower than other developed countries, leading to higher birth rates for teens who live in the United States. To me, that's an embarrassment. We have the strongest military in the world, but our teens don't have the decency to prevent childbearing when not prepared. Teenage pregnancy is not only a family problem, but also a government problem. Each year, $40 million is spent helping families that started off as teen pregnancy in the forms of welfare, all kids, etc. Today's teenagers need to take matters into their own hands and use the resources that they have available to prevent pregnancy. Aside from getting pregnant, teens also have the risk of contracting a sexually transmitted disease. Todd Jacobs defines the term as such. Sexually transmitted diseases are infections that spread from one person to another through sexual contact. There are thousands of STDs that a teenager could catch even without intercourse. Some diseases that are bacterial can be treated if caught early. However, leaving an STD untreated can do much harm to the body and leave irreversible effects on the individual. Ms. Farrington says that left untreated, a sexually transmitted disease can cause cancer, heart disease, brain damage, blindness, infertility, and death. The human immunodeficiency virus infection, better known as HIV, and the autoimmune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS, are not treatable sexually transmitted diseases. These specific diseases weaken the body's immune system and attack healthy cells, slowly killing a person because they are unable to fight off other infections. However, there are medications that can help with the symptoms, but ultimately the disease is terminal. Evelyn Lerman states that in the U.S., 1 in 4 cases of AIDS was infected as a teenager. Most teens that think that it won't happen to them, or they can't be affected, or that it only happens to older people. That's far from the truth. Ms. Farrington says that every hour of every day, 2 American teens become infected with the virus that causes HIV and AIDS. Most teenagers think that it's a thing of their past and that it's not going to affect their generation, and that's not true. Teens need free condoms to prevent catching or spreading a sexually transmitted disease. Most teenagers fail to use birth control or condoms because they're scared to talk to their parents. Parents need to step up and be open-minded and willing to listen to their teens when they're interested in sex. According to the National Campaign to Prevent Teenage Pregnancy, 69% of teenagers said that they would have waited to have sex if their parents would have listened to them or talked to them about sex. It's better to talk openly than to come home with a pregnant teenager or a teenager that has an STD. Another reason that teens don't use birth control or condoms is because of the cost. A lot of people can't afford a monthly prescription for birth control. They can be up to $75. Some of them are cheaper, but some of them are more expensive. A lot of the times, teens don't have any insurance. No insurance means no doctor's appointments. No doctor's appointments means no prescriptions. And a lot of times, teens don't have any extra money from working their minimum wage jobs to buy the condoms. So if there was free protection given out to high school students, there would be no questions that they would get the protection that they need. So, teens should have access to free birth control and condoms while they're in high school. If this is allowed, then teen pregnancy rates would be drastically lowered, and less teenagers would have an STD. Therefore, they could live a more happy and fulfilled life. So if your teen comes home pregnant or with an STD, just because they don't have access to the protection that they need, whose fault really is it? Yours or theirs?